Since the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, earlier this year, Israel and Hezbollah, the Iranian-allied militant and political group in Lebanon, have been engaged in fierce fighting despite on and off ceasefires. To tell us what the situation looks like on the ground in Beirut, I'm joined by Maha Yahya, director of the Middle East Center at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Pleasure to have you on again, Maha. Tell me, what is it like to be living in Beirut through this? Because the reports are that, large parts of the country are now occupied, towns have been bombed, hundreds of thousands of people have displaced. What does it feel like to you?
Good afternoon, Fareed. It's good to be with you. Look, the situation on the ground, people are very anxious. I'm in Beirut, and the city is literally throbbing with anxiety. There are more than 1 million people who've been displaced. Almost 1/3 of southern Lebanon is occupied today. 10 to 15% of Lebanese territory. Upwards of 63 towns and villages have been completely eradicated. Literally vaporized, dynamited, bombed from the air. So it's very tenuous. People are anxious. They're tired of war. In some parts of the country, there's the performance of normality. People are trying to go about their daily lives, go out, but you see the effects of war, whether you're living under the bombs or not, everywhere. You see it in displaced people and the overcrowding of the capital, for example. The population in Beirut alone has risen by 60% in the last couple of months. And in just the sense of loss amongst people who are now, some of them are either living in makeshift shelters or some are still in tents on the street.
So we have this peace proposal that the Israelis have made and the Lebanese government sort of agreed to, but Hezbollah said no. What is going on? Why is Hezbollah resisting the ceasefire?
It's not really a ceasefire. It's a kind of declaration of principles. And quite frankly, the declaration is very geared towards Israel's interests, if you like. It doesn't talk about Israel's withdrawal from the areas it's currently occupying. It doesn't talk about the return of people to the areas that they've been pushed out from, forcibly displaced from. It doesn't talk about how are we going to rebuild and reconstruct. In fact, the military operations continue, and it makes any kind of ceasefire contingent on the disarmament of Hezbollah. They've come out with they've proposed what I think may be an interesting idea, which is to create these pilot zones where the Israeli army withdraws and then the Lebanese army takes over, and Hezbollah withdraws from these areas. Their armaments are taken away. But there's no time frame, there's no timeline. And quite honestly, if one looks at what's happened in Gaza over the past 2.5 years, the way this current Israeli government has behaved, all indications are it has no interest in any kind of cessation of hostilities. So there are lots of concerns around this. Now, Hezbollah will de facto say, no, we're not going to agree to this, in part because Iran is not on board also. Since the assassination of the former Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's Secretary General, the IRGC have effectively been directly involved in the affairs of Hezbollah, particularly its military arm. And they've worked on helping them regroup, rearm, etc. So it's not a local decision at the same time. It's directly tied to the negotiations between the US and Iran. Iran is using Lebanon as well as part of its leverage in its discussions with the US.
So there are two narratives about what all of this has done to Hezbollah. One is that the Lebanese people are angry with Hezbollah for having dragged the country into a war. And the other is that given the extent of Israel's bombing, people are now sympathizing with Hezbollah. There's a renewed sense of a solidarity with Hezbollah because Israel is bombing so furiously. Which narrative do you think is more accurate?
Both narratives are accurate in all frankness. I mean, both are truths to a certain extent. A majority of the Lebanese people, including members of the Shiite community, are fed up. They're fed up of war. They're very angry that they've been dragged into a war that they really did not want to get into. As I mentioned earlier, there is significant destruction in southern Lebanon. Entire areas have been literally had life bombed out of them. And we're not just talking about physical infrastructure. We're talking about health, education, cultural areas, historic sites, property rights, cadastre. I mean, literally everything. Phosphorus has been used in agricultural zones, which means that these areas can no longer be used for agricultural purposes. So all the pillars, things that would allow life to resume, economic life to resume, have been totally eradicated. So there's a lot of anger, and who is going to compensate? However, at the same time, there is a sense that this is a war against the Shia community, because most of the targeted areas, in its rhetoric, in its bombardments, Israel is not distinguishing between Hezbollah and members of the Shia community. So there is a sense that the community itself is being targeted. This narrative is being amplified by Hezbollah. Hezbollah itself has lost its local allies. It has no real partners, significant partners on the ground today from the other communities. So there is a sense of need to rally around the party as the only defense against what the community feels is an attack against it. And I think this is where there's been a big miscalculation over the past year and a half by the international community. The idea that you cannot help strengthen state institutions and a government that has taken incredibly courageous decisions over the past year and a half without dismantling Hezbollah. When you're dealing with non-state actors, you deal with them both politically and militarily. It's not one at the expense of the other.
Maha, a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for helping us understand it.
Thank you, Fareed. Thank you for having me.